Hello and welcome to day 1 of week 4 of Create It with Live Code. Today we're going to start building the clock application. Before we do that, we're going to step back and talk a little bit more about application development principles and how to structure a typical app development project. We've been coding our app step by step without creating a features list or tracking our progress so far. However, the Create It with Live Code course is designed to introduce different concepts that will help you to become a professional programmer. This week we are introducing the concept of the app development process itself. This is the process of creating a list of functionalities for your app and breaking these into small tasks into small increments in a plan. Development iterations in an app project such as this one are usually short timeframes that last from a few days to a week or so to work on specific functionality. Since our app is not so complicated, our iterations will be much shorter. But first, let's understand a little bit more about this process. If you look at this week's clock app, you'll see that it has 4 main areas of functionality: the world clock, the alarm, the stopwatch, and the timer. So this week we're focused on the process and the management of developing those sections of your app. You may or may not be familiar with concepts like agile software development, but if you understand the basic concept of a feature and a function list, then you're halfway there. In the case of our clock app, Apple has already done the user interface and feature design, so all we have to do is list the functionality and manage the process using an agile method known as Scrum. There have been quite a few software development processes that have been developed over the last 40 years or so. The key changes recently have been changes in programming languages and web development that have helped agile methods to gain in popularity. An agile system will give you benefit from many of the advantages that live code gives you. It means that you can go out and ask your customers or potential audience for feedback and then very quickly go in there and make those changes. It's also very simple, and it's a process that embraces the dynamic flow of live code the best. Given that most live code teams are small and most of them are agile, Scrum is the methodology that we recommend to provide the best benefits. It will let you implement, and it will help to ensure the success of any app that you're producing. I do highly recommend you take a few minutes to read some of the links that we've provided, which describe the Scrum development methodology in a little bit more detail. You can find those links in the slide deck that accompanies today's presentation. The first step in app development is creating a list of the functionality in the app. This is then converted into a task, posted on a Scrum board, and then typically it's assigned to somebody. Normally a wireframe or a sketch drawing is also created with the functionality list. In our case, Apple have already provided the design, so all we need to do is list the functionality with a screen. We've divided the app into the 4 sections that cover the footer navigation bar. Take a look at the list we've created, and then maybe you can create your own Scrum board to help with the development of the clock app. So here's our function list. We've got our digital time list, our clock time list, and our add city list, and a list of all of the features that go with each one of those different sections of the program. We have the same for the additional screens over the rest of the program, and these translate into a Scrum board where we put the title of the feature on the very left-hand side. We create a number of to-do list items, and essentially what happens in a normal process is that when those items are getting worked on, they get moved into the in-progress section. When they're getting tested, they get moved into the tested section, and then they get moved along to done. And this allows different people in your team to manage or work on different areas of the project, as well as helping you if you're just an individual writing the app from scratch all by yourself. So here we have lists for the alarm function, all of the various different individual features for each section within those sets of screens, and a bit more detail on all of that here. And we would create a separate Scrum board for working with the alarm. And the same with the stopwatch function. Again, we have all of the various screens and all of the individual functions. All of those then go onto the board, and they're the things that would have to get created to build that, and the timer function as well. Feel free to spend a little bit longer looking at the slides and understanding what we've done in terms of breaking these tasks down and putting them onto the various different boards. Wireframing is a very common process when building an app, and as we already mentioned in our case, a lot of that work is done for you in the sense that we're replicating apps that already exist. However, when it comes time for you to start building your own apps, it's a good idea to start being creative and imagining how your user experience elements are going to be laid out and how your users are going to navigate and interact with your application. You don't want to create something that's pixel perfect, you just want to create a general layout that gives you an idea as to what the user flow is going to be through the system. The easiest and fastest way to do that is to sketch your screens out using LiveCode itself. Not only does that very rapidly allow you to put together a set of screen layouts which help you to understand what your app is going to look like, but it allows you to very quickly start to put in some basic functionality that allows a prospective customer to start navigating through the various different screens to get a sense of what it's like to work with the app or what the flow through that app is going to be like. Okay, having covered those parts and principles for the software development process, let's get into today's app. We're going to go into LiveCode, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the navigation bar and import some icons for today's app. So let's go over to LiveCode, and as before, we're going to create a new main stack, and we're going to go into the stack inspector for our main stack here. I'm going to call it clock, and I'm going to go down to the size and position pane here and set the width to be 375, which is the same as all of the apps that we've been producing so far in this series, and 667 tall. And then going to build the start of our navigation bar at the bottom, which is going to be a rectangle graphic, so that's just below this little fold out section on our tools palette here. This should be familiar to you by now. I'm going to drag out a square rectangle graphic, make it just a little bit bigger, use the arrow keys just to position that into place. And I'm going to go up to our basic properties for that, set it to be opaque, go into the colors, set the border color for it to be a grey color, just maybe about a quarter of the way down the greys there, and set the fill color just to be a very subtle off grey color there. So that gives us, but I might even make that a tiny bit lighter, that gives us our navigation bar for the bottom of the screen. Next up, I'm going to go and import the various images that we want to use. Now, in LiveCode, it's customary to create an image card that contains all of the images so that they're all in one place, they're easy to find, they're easy to update. So I'm going to create a new card here, and I'm going to name my card image or card resources. So if we go down into the card inspector in the object menu, and I'm going to call that card resources. And into my resources card, I'm going to import the images that came with the downloadable file. So we're going to go that came with today's lesson. So we're going to go into import as control, choose image file here from that list, and then I'm going to go and pull in all of the clock icons and the highlight icons for our footer bar. So I'm just going to select the folder here, and I'm going to select over all of those files. So just clicked and held down Shift and brought all of those in. So now those have all been imported, I'm going to lay those out neatly and in a sensible order. So I'm going to put this one up here. This is our world clock there. This is for our alarm clock. Our timer is here, and our stopwatch is there. Match all these icons up, and that gives us a layout for the icons that's similar to the layout that we're actually going to use. So I'm going to go back now to our first card here, and I'm going to create our navigation footer. So I'm going to bring in 4 buttons, and we've shown you several times how to drag out buttons and set the properties. And I'm just going to do it a slightly different way this time, which is a little bit faster. I'm just going to go into new control and just choose blank button here, because that has all the properties turned off essentially. And this is going to be our world clock button. So I'm going to give that the name world clock, and turn on the show name property for this object. And then I'm going to go and choose those icons. I'm going to go into the icon chooser here and just choose this stack from the list, and we will see our world clock icon. And you can do this by taking a note of all of the individual icon numbers as well, and then typing them in. But given that they're all fairly distinctive and it's pretty clear what they look like, it should be easy enough for us just to go through and select those icons. And in fact, I'm only importing the icon. I'm not importing the highlight icon just yet, so I'll take that off there. Okay, so I'm going to put that button neatly down at the bottom there, and then we're going to clone that across to do our alarm. So let's choose our alarm icon here, which is this one here, and name the button alarm. And then I'm going to do our stopwatch. And I'm not using the red ones now because only one of them is going to be active at any one point. So I'll just put in the stopwatch here. And then finally, I need to name that one. I'm going to call this one timer. And go and choose the timer icon for that one, which is this one here. So in the same way that we've done this in the past, we're now going to use the alignment feature to align these objects. So I'm just going to select over these, and I'm going to align them to the top and distribute them edge to edge in the order that I selected them. And then I'm just going to space those out a little bit manually just to make it look a little bit better. So that looks about right now in terms of relatively even spacing all the way along there. Great, so we've got our bar at the bottom there. The next thing to do is to group this bar together. And here we're going to introduce the live code concept of background. And the idea here is that we're going to use this same footer bar across all the cards within our stack. Now in order to do that, once we've created the group, what we need to do is we need to choose shared group and behave like background. If we turn that on, then that will allow us, if we want to place it onto multiple cards. I'm also going to recommend that we turn on the can't delete property for the group, because if we're using a background group, it's very easy to accidentally delete a group when what you actually wanted to do is simply remove it from that given card rather than actually delete it. And I'm going to name this group navigation. So that's the navigation pane for the bottom of our stack now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create all of the cards that we need for our world clock, our alarm, our stopwatch, and our timer. So I'm going to go into this card, which is the first card in the series here, and I'm going to call this card world clock. And again, make sure that you name this all as one word so that it is correct when you refer to it in code. And then going to go object new card. Now you'll notice that when I create a new card here, the card number has incremented, so we've got our new card successfully. And this group has remained present on the card. And that's because whenever you create a new card in live code, which has been created from a card that has a background group on it, live code will automatically place the background group onto the card. And I'll just give you an idea. If I select this group, I turned off select group controls and I selected the group navigation. If I go up to the object menu, I can actually do remove group, which will unplace that background from this card. But if I go back to our first card, it's still present. So I haven't actually deleted it, I simply have a choice over which card to place it on or not place it on. To get it back, go back to the object menu and choose place group, and you'll see a list of all of the backgrounds in your stack. This way you can choose whether or not to show a given region on any given card. They don't have to be consecutive, and you can have any combination that you like in live code. There are no limitations on that. So I'm going to name this card now. This is going to be the second card, which is of course card alarm. And then I'm going to create a third card. Just need to choose card inspector again so I don't rename my stack. which I'm going to call stopwatch, and then another card here. Again, just use card inspector there, which I'm going to call timer, or card timer rather. Okay, so now we have our stack, we have our background navigation group. It's time to add a bit of code into our navigation. To do that, make sure that the select group controls is on, because before adding the code, we're going to add a custom property to each one of these individual buttons. Now, in LiveCode, there's several ways to code the functionality that I'm about to show you, and custom property is just one of the ways. There are other ways to code this functionality, such as checking the target property when a message is sent. But I'll come on and explain what I'm talking about in a moment. First of all, let's just go into each one of these buttons and go down to custom properties. And we're just going to hit the little plus button here. And we're going to add in C navigation, which is just a property that we've made up. And I'm putting a C in front of it by convention, in the same way that we've suggested that you put a T in front of script local variables, and an L in front of script wide local variables, and a G and a P. We recommend a C in front of custom properties to make them easy to remember or read in your code. Custom properties are persistent, and they save with a stack in exactly the same way that any of the other properties that you set might save within the stack. So I'm going to create the C navigation property here, and I'm just going to put a 1 into that. And I'm going to do exactly the same for the other buttons. So C navigation is going to be 1, and you'll see why we're doing this in just a moment, so just bear with me. C navigation 1, and finally C navigation 1 there. Now I'm going to turn off select grouped controls, and I'm going to select the group itself rather than one of the individual elements within the group, and go into the code window, which is where we're going to start adding the code for our navigation group. And I'm going to put in a mouse up handler here on mouse up, and we're going to start off by reading in the custom property of the target. So put the C navigation of the target into tNav button. So if one of those buttons within that group has been clicked on, then that group is going to receive one of those buttons as the target, and the C navigation that's going to be put into the nav button is going to be a 1. If, on the other hand, I click in this grey background area, because I haven't set a custom property, it's not going to be a 1. If tNav button is 1, then set active card, the short name of the target. So this is a custom handler that we're going to be creating in just a moment, and what it does is it will set up our active card and change the icons and the highlight icons for each one of these objects. Now, the other thing to note here is that because this group is a background group, if you remember from the previous lesson that we did, we talked about the message path, and groups are in the message path for any object within the group. But a background group contains a global feature set that is available on any card in which the background is placed. And therefore, this background is in the message path even for objects on that card that are not within the group. Now, that allows you to implement shared functionality or a shared library that's available only on certain cards, but it also means that any objects that we place in here are going to generate a mouse up that will get received by this group. So because we've checked to make sure that the custom property is present, that will prevent us from having this handler, the set active card handler, activated unless it is one of those objects that we want to target. And as I mentioned a moment ago, you could use things like the owner of the target, or there are other ways of doing that, but this is a perfectly good way, and it gives you an idea of some of the power of using custom properties. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add in our set active card handler. So on set active card, p active card, so that's going to contain the short name of the target. Then we're going to say switch L last active card. So switch is a control structure that lets you do different actions depending on the value of a particular variable, and in this case we're going to be using L last active card, which I'm now going to declare at the very top of our script, local L last active card equals, I'm going to put world clock in there. So what I've done is I've not just declared a script-wide local variable. I've said the very first time you run this script, please put world clock into that variable, so it won't be empty that first time that you run. So now we're going to add into our switch statement case world clock, and then put in a break there, which means that it will execute everything in between these statements if the L last active card is world clock, and then case alarm, put in a break there. Now don't forget the break statement, because otherwise a live code will continue to execute all of the other statements even if they don't match. Case stopwatch, break, and then case timer, break. This is going to allow us to set our black icon property, or the actual icon property, to the correct value. So now what we want to do is we want to take the correct icon ID for each one of these icons, or the black version of each icon. And to do that, I'm going to leave our script editor window open, and I'm going to navigate through, just using the keyboard here, to our resources card, and I'm going to use that to work out what each icon ID is. So that's icon ID 1012. So I'm going to go put 1012 into T black icon. I'll copy that line of code down here for these other ones. And you do need to go into your resources card and check that you have the same IDs, because if you did anything in this sequence in a different order, then you may find that these have got entirely different IDs associated with them in your own stack. So do go in and just check that you're using the correct IDs rather than copying from the video, because otherwise you may well find that it breaks. And 1007 there. So it doesn't take a moment to do, just to put all of those in. And then the next step is to go set the icon of button L last active card to T black icon. So we're setting the icon property. So if you remember, we're saving our stack in a state with world clock highlighted, and we're saving it with world clock as the first initialized variable. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set the L last active card, which will in the first instance be the world clock, which is correct, to the black version of that icon, if that's the one that gets selected. So next I'm going to set the text color. Set the text color of button L last active card to 252 1,10, which is of course red. And now we're going to add in some more code for setting up whichever card is the active one now. So switch our parameter here, p active card, and this is going to be the short name of whichever one of these objects was clicked on. And I'm now going to go case world clock. I'll just put in each of these statements: case alarm, case stopwatch, case timer. And then into each one of these we're going to now set up our red icon. So I'll just copy this here and turn that into T red icon. And we're just going to go back to our resources card, and we'll say that that's 1011. And copy and paste that line into each one of these statements. Now you could of course choose to store these in custom properties rather than hard coding them in the script and then just read in the custom property for each object, but this is a very straightforward way, and it's hopefully really clear and understandable. So I'm going to put in our red icon, which is 1009, our stopwatch icon for red, which is 1005, and our timer icon here, which is 1006. And by now this should be making sense, hopefully, and fairly straightforward. Set the icon of button P active card to T red icon and set the text color of button P active card to 2521,10. And of course, I intended here not to set it to red, but to set that one to black. That's more like it there. And then put P active card into L last active card and go to card T active card. Or rather P active card. And so now we should have a navigation bar which is navigating between all of the cards. And that of course requires us to put the correct card name into that variable. So put card world clock into T active card. Put card alarm, card stopwatch, and card timer. And if you're wondering how I'm getting that formatting right each time I paste, I'm just pressing tab, which causes that alignment to happen. Now you could simplify this script of course a little bit, not just by storing the icons that you're going to use in custom properties and setting the icon of the target to maybe the C red icon of the target. You could also name the buttons the same as the card that you're going to, and then use the label property to display a different value. And then you would, instead of going to card T active card, you'd go to card, the short name of the target, for example, which allows you to write less code. But this way is good practice because it lets you understand the switch structure, it lets you understand how to create some branching logic that does different things. And as your apps get more sophisticated, you're going to find that there are plenty of times when you do need to code things like this out. So I'm going to apply that now, and we should have an app that is moving between each of the individual cards. And that does indeed appear to be working. And then the other thing I'm just going to fix there is there is a highlight issue here. So I'm just going to turn that off, the auto highlight property for each of these objects off, so that we don't get that flash when we click on them. And there we go. That brings us to the end of day 1.